Evening all, Graham Penguin here, and we are live. So, welcome to this week's live chat. We got pretty global last time. We had chats from all around the country. So let's see where we go today. Now, if I could work out how to, I might actually stick a poll in this, but yes, so tonight's main topic of conversation, I know, and the whole point of this thing was for you guys to ask questions on the videos and whatever else, but it always seems that you want to ask about something else. Yeah, so I thought perhaps the main topic of conversation here could be on lightened flywheels. And the question with that is, do lightened flywheels make more power? It could be a yes, it could be a no, or some say only at the wheels. On the other hand, and my answer has changed over the years, it would be depends how you measure it. So let's see. Oh look, that works. Make some pretty heart-shaped things, right? I'm sure there's a way to add a poll list, but maybe I can't in this here software. So what have we been up to this week? Well, not a lot. It's been a quiet week, but I did get the second of the two cross flows, the South African one, up and running on the dyno. And not surprisingly, it made very similar power to the first one, which you'd kind of expect. Same cam, same carbs, almost the same capacity, almost the same compression, a cylinder head from Vulcan and a cylinder head from Burton. But again, how much difference is there going to be there? Not a great deal. But what kind of impressed me with both these is that these two latest crossflows I run is how well they've responded to a 2.4 cam. Now, my mentor years ago basically stuck a BCF2 in everything, or 3 if you wanted to be a bit more radical. And to that end, that's all I've gone with. I've gone with BCF2s because that's what everyone fitted. But in reality, having run these couple of engines up with the 224 cam in it and comparing it with my own cam or comparing it with the 224 cam, I don't think there's any room for the BCF2. The 224 seems to blow it out the window. Right. Okay. Crete 96. Are Vulcan still going? Yes, they are. They've moved. They share premises with HT Racing down at Brands Hatch. Rob2RS, have I tested a copy type tin choke carbs? Have I done a 32, 36 copy? Rob, the answer to that is yes. It worked the same as a genuine Weber 32, 36. The only thing is it peed out fuel everywhere. I couldn't stop things from leaking. Stephen Williams, on the answer to the question of flywheel, do lightened flywheels make more power? You say no, the engine produces the same horsepower regardless of the flywheel. Well, or does it? Because what you're actually seeing is that, yes, the combustion pressure on top of the pistons is still the same as anything else. But what we measure is actually torque and acceleration at the back of it. And the reason the engine accelerates faster with a lighter flywheel and the car is that less power is being absorbed. And it depends how you test it. If you run an engine on an old, if you run an engine steady state on the dyno, or like on an old Heenan-Frold water brake, where basically it just holds the RPM and you vary the load. You're not doing it via Excel runs. You will see the same power, whatever. But if you measure power with an engine doing Excel runs, like a rolling road or like the engine dyno does, the power numbers do change depending on the RPM increase. So it kind of depends how you measure it. Right. Andrew Wallace, light and flywheels, no more power, at least not enough to worry about. Well, yeah, there you go. If the engine accelerates, if your engine with your light and flywheel accelerates up the road faster, there's less power being absorbed. So there is more power somewhere. Because else the engine would accelerate the same. And with the more sophisticated, even with the more sophisticated engine dynos, it does show, because even though the engine dyno is the same as a rolling road, it allows the engine to accelerate at a given RPM, 200 or 300 RPM per second. It would, theory, because the dyno's controlling it, controlling the rate of acceleration, it won't actually show any power difference. Well, that was always what I thought. But in practice, that is not what happens. If you change the Excel rate on the dyno, it does change the power. Now, with your dyno software, which is a bit more complicated than the Superflow, that effect is less pronounced because you can play with inertia factor, so you get the same power level, whatever you vary the RPM at. But yeah, it's an age-old question. Next up, the engine has more momentum with a heavier flywheel. Assume it would have a bit more torque. Like for have with a, well, yeah and no. Again, the lighter flywheel doesn't change the engine's torque output because you've still got the same cylinder pressure, the same sparks, the same everything. So it doesn't change the actual torque output because the torque is like a steady state. But the one thing where it really shows up is that the ability to stall an engine. So I remember a lot of years ago, I built an engine for a friend, and it was a cam-headed Vauxhall engine in Opal GT. And we put a really light, and I lightened the flywheel, and then my friend changed the flywheel, and we put a really light one on, and the car was almost impossible to drive on a trailer, or backing in and out of things, because it would either stall or bucket load of revs. I mean, it went like a scolded cat, but it was much less controllable. And maybe at very low RPM, with a lightened flywheel, it's possibly the engine's more likely to sulk if you hit the throttle too hard than if you feed it in more gently or you have a heavier flywheel. But there's no right or wrong answer. But basically, if you measure under steady state, it's exactly the same, and if you measure it on acceleration, it's not. Flywheel choice about drivability. Yes, the heavier the flywheel, the nicer the drive. So yeah, you can feed the clutch in gently without a zillion revs, and it will pull nicely. And some things will be really shunty on the transmission. Andrew, isn't everything a compromise? Isn't it all? Or you go automatic and you don't worry about it. But then, if you go automatic, what about the stall speed of the torque converter? Because if you've got higher speed stall converter, the engine revs will fly up with no drive, and then the higher RPM, the drive's in and boom, bang, you're away. So, clattering now. That'd have been a customer dropping some keys through the door for a job tomorrow. So, well, where did we get to? Yeah, for the moment, I'm done on flywheels, but keep going, because it's not just flywheels you can lighten. What about rods and pistons? If you lighten them, do more horsepower. You can. If you lighten rods and pistons, they're not storing energy because that's reciprocating. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. So you're absorbing more momentum as you, because actually, if you think about it, if something's going in one direction and you've got to stop it and pull it the other way, that's absorbing power. But then once it's moving, it wants to still keep going. Gearboxes, yeah. What about gearboxes? Here's something I've just remembered from years gone past. I remember Dave Walker talking about lightening crown wheels in differentials. Yes, a heavy flywheel absolutely stores more momentum. Yes, yeah. There's no doubt about that. Dimitri's says he thinks a heavy flywheel keeps torque after gear changes. Yeah, and it can work. It can work like that. It absolutely can work like that. And again, it's the sort of thing that perhaps you lose a little before the gear change, but you gain a bit after it. So, and I think it's a big question in drag racing, and a lot of there's a big argument about that. There's them that say you need light, there's them that say you're heavy, and I think that in drag racing, unless you've got the perfect setup, you probably want quite heavy, particularly if you're on a very sticky circuit like Santa Pod. HP BMW is a good box. Yeah, it's an awesome gearbox. And Rob, I've spent my life hating automatic gearboxes, but modern day 8-speed ZF box in a BMW is so good that my current car is automatic. My previous was a 6-speed manual, and it didn't need it. Really, you only needed 3 gears. So, yeah, although I hated autos, and that came about from my dislike of sluggishness and loss of performance, but 3-litre turbo diesel, it's got all the torque in the world. Like you say, piston rods. So, like you said, pistons are rods. Would that make more power? Well, who knows? And it's like in terms of lighter pistons and rods, I think it's like the same argument that long rods and short pistons are better in a performance engine. I've not seen it. I've not seen it in an engine, because I've run long-rodded engines and I've run non-long-rodded engines, and they're pretty much the same. I do remember Steve at Vulcan saying the long-rodded engines seem more revvy. That's not very scientific. Dimitri's, use it in a Pinto for gravel. Yeah, I think absolutely. Particularly if you're in a rally car, you don't want to get bogging down. Alan Wood. Oh, hello. Alan's in the room. I assume that's the Alan Wood I know. Say how to feel if it's that Alan. Yeah, I mean, like lightening a crank, you can again, lightening a crank is similar to lightening a flywheel. But then some things will knock themselves to bits because the crank needs a certain amount of counterweight. So if there's not enough counterweights in there, the crank effectively wants to rattle around in the mains and knocks out the mains. So what we've got next. Okay, so it doesn't actually matter. It's a feeling on the flywheel. Well, yeah, yes, no. And about, I think it's as much about the purpose as anything. You know, I think it's about your application. So, oh yeah, Alan, yeah, okay. So yeah, it is that Alan, Phil. Have you still got a TVR, Alan? We've got quite a few TVR engines around here. Sorry, V8 Rover, but yeah, call them TVRs. And Phil still got a Westfield. That was a fun car. That was Phil's Westfield. Yeah, I actually, back to the flywheels. I think feeling, yeah, I think it's a matter about the ability to what you're doing. Can you get the car off the line? Does it bog down coming out the corners? So sometimes with a manual, a lightened flywheel actually helps the engine drop RPM between gear changes, which can help a gearbox select the next gear. Because if the engine's able to decelerate more, there's less load on the synchros or the dogs. So, yeah, I mean, but I think a large part of it is about weight of the vehicle. You got to look at a motorbike engine. There is no flywheel in a motorbike engine, or there's something about this big that's. There's no flywheel as such in most motorbike engines. It's the crank pins, it's the alternator, etc. So, in fact, even them on bikes, a lot of them now they drive the alternator and primary gear off a gear built into the crank to keep the components down. So, yeah, and I don't think there's ever a right or a wrong. Matthias says he's got a 4 kilo flywheel in his rally escort. In the type of hairpins, you've got to kick the clutch a bit and sometimes really get it going. Would it have been better with a bigger volume? Well, pens. If a heavier flywheel can help keep the revs up a little more, so it's less likely to bog. But if you're on a, does it stall? Can you get it off the line? That's what I think. That's what I think. I think this important thing. Another comment. Forgive me. I'm rubbish at pronouncing names, so I'm not going to even tell this. But this looks Swedish, Norwegian. Anyway, flywheel. It says flywheel stores kinetic energy, good for fuel economy and comfort. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that if you try and drive a car with an overly light flywheel, it's horrible. It's like trying to drive something with huge carburetors and a full race cam on the road. Doesn't really work. You can do it, but it's not nice. But you know, certainly in the drag race world, with a light flywheel and a sticky surface like you have a Santa Pod, the surface is so grippy that with a really light flywheel, you can't launch it because there's not enough inertia stored, so that when the tires grip, it just drags the revs all the way down. Whereas to launch, you need a certain amount of wheel spin because you can't go from 0 mile an hour to whatever it is in an instant with no wheel spin. because the engine will stop. So certainly in a drag world on a sticky track, I certainly believe heavier is better, unless you've got launch control and you can dial everything in, so you're really on the ball with you know, the RPM, the slip. Stephen Williams says, with a heavier flywheel, you're storing kinetic energy, great for bends and liftoff. Yeah, you know, but have you got more power? I wonder back in the day how much time I had full putting to work out how heavier expo or flywheel should have been. Well, here's the thing: they didn't use the same weight flywheel and everything. I remember we had a stack of flywheels from various things, and some were heavier than others. More than likely, if you had a if you had a flywheel from a transit, be it a cross-flow engine transit or a Pinto engine transit, it was a sight heavier than if you had one out of a Cortina or an Escort. Stephen Williams says, no, it doesn't make more power. But then, as I said, we're kind of back to, it depends how you measure it. Right. Got another question here. Since you need to handle a lot of engines in and out the dyno room, how do you move them? I assume without lifting themselves. I've got an engine crane. Just a engine crane, set of wheels, arm, hydraulic jack. Just crane them in out. It's a bit tight because we have to go around a 90-degree corner. But yeah, I do it with an engine crane. So for the most part, I do it single-handed. Fact. I'm just thinking I can see it from here, but if I move the computer, I'll risk losing all of you. So we don't want to do that. So curious yet? No one's yet commented on my last video, which was really short because I wasn't planning to make a video, but my last video was really short, and it was just a couple of clips on a back-to-back with Weber versus some FAJS carbs. I don't know if they actually come from China, but if the FAJS is, though, I know there's lots of replica Weber carbs out there. But in terms of genuine Webers or these carbs which are supplied by Ike, I've got to say, so far I've seen no difference other than the cost, which is a nice thing to say. Were they new carbs? Andrew says, were they new carbs? Okay, the FAJSs were new. The Webers were not. I'd stripped them and stuck them through the ultrasonic cleaner. So they've been properly cleaned internally, and I'd reassembled the new needle valves and gaskets and set the float height. Steve, yeah, I guess it's Steve Cos, but it says Steve Cos. What's the price difference? Roughly speaking, about $1,000. And that's this is carbs on the manifold, bolted up with linkage, with ram pipes. I think if you look them up on Burton's or Eurocarb's website, I think it's about £1,800 for a set of 40D series for a cross flow, and I think the same carbs from Ike are about £1,000 cheaper. So yeah. Matthias says, how many engines have you dynoed over the years? Have you counted? No, I haven't. I've only been personally dynoing engines here in the dyno the last few years myself. good few over the rolling road, on the rolling road over the years. Which Pinto had the most power? Well, that is the one in Andy Pipe's Escort. This one. I've yet to make the video. We've seen, I say it's got 250 horsepower. I think the very best dyno run we saw 251 and 251 for 252 and 202 pound-foot torque. But generally it shows 249, 250. And that's from a 2.3, but it has got an aluminium cylinder head. So Nick says, sorry, quick question. Pinto 1.6 R and unleaded valve seats really quiet on road engine. If an old cast iron head has done years of work on leaded fuel, it will run quite happily on unleaded for quite a long while before the seats start to recess. So keep an eye on exhaust valve clearances, because if the seats start to recess, the valve clearances will close up. And to be honest, the repair, if the valve seats close up, is new inserts. And the way to make it unleaded is new inserts. So I would just run it. I would just run it and just keep an eye on the valve clearances, particularly if it's never been to bits. The harder you drive it, the more temperature you put in it, the more likely you suffer from valve seat recession. Andrew says, yeah, good price. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, yeah, thousand grand difference in the carbs is, yeah, it's good. And I haven't seen any actual difference between the genuine Webers and the FAJSs. Steve Williams says he doesn't know much about Weber carbs. He's an old-time diesel engine builder and tester using the Heen and Fraud dyno. Yeah, well, on your dyno, for sure, you're going to see no more power whether you've got a lightened or a heavier flywheel. So yeah, Andy says I've given the game away. Well, I've mentioned this more than once, Andy. Yeah, I have, but there's only 6 of you watching anyway, so nobody's going to notice, and I still haven't made the video. So, yeah, I did look today about making the 250 brake Pinto video, and I'm struggling to find the footage. I got some dyno runs of it. We got some graphs. I'll make something out of it. So, next comment, right. I rebuilt my Pinto only 1,000 miles ago. All new parts, new camera stuff. It's always been heavy, puffing oil from the exhaust. I guess it's the rings, even if they were new. What's your rough idea? Okay. When does it puff the oil? Does it puff the oil under throttle or just at idle? Because if it does it under load as you throttle up, either the rings haven't sealed, they're not going to seal. There's an issue with piston and bore clearances, or were the bores honed, were they glaze busted? Because that can make a big difference. But if it smokes when you let off the throttle, the oil's going down the guides. Demetrius says, do I have a dyno test with RL32 camshaft? No, I've never run an RL32. Yeah, I've never run an RL32, so I'm interested to try it simply because I've never run one. But I don't know. I think if I did, I'll be disappointed because there's got to be a reason hardly anyone uses it. But it's in mind that when I've got some money spare, which is kind of like never, I might buy one. Okay, we're back to the smoking Pinto. It smokes going on the throttle. Okay. If it smokes going on the throttle, it's pistons, it's rings, it's bores. Yeah, that's it. So Nick Edwards says, if you change the cam on a 1.6 Pinto, what would be your choice for a road engine? Right. Depends how mad you're going. If you've got a 1600 Pinto that came from Ford with a single choke carb, then a standard 2-litre cam is an upgrade, because the standard 2-litre cam is what Ford fitted in 1600 GT spec engines and Mexicos and stuff. But I guess it also depends what you're going to do with compression stuff. Probably something like one of the 134 cams, one of the high torque cams, because it'd be easy to put a lot of cam in a 1600 and lose all the torque. Luke says, what cams do I advise to improve a 2-litre Zetec blacktop running carb and Omex ECU? In all honesty, I don't know. I've never run a Zetec. You need to talk to someone that knows more about these far more about these than I do. I've got a Zetec here to dyno, one of Ike's engines. So you know what? I would suggest you give Ike, as in Ike Flack, as in Ike Engineering, a call and talk to him. He's pretty clued up on cams. Martin McKendry says, what power would you expect from a 2.5 or 2.6 Pinto with a Burton CNC head and road rally cam? What size IDF throttle bodies would you be needed? Right. Road rally cam. Well, yeah. Which road rally cam? Too many cams to choose from. What do you call a road rally cam? Something like a Burton BF63. If you're on throttle bodies, 45s or 48s, but I would have thought in most applications a 45 throttle body is plenty, because a 45 throttle body is effectively the same as having a 50mm carb with a 45mm choke in it. So but as for power, when you make them bigger, you tend to add torque. You don't tend to add a lot of power. So I would have thought that anything over 210 horsepower, Martin, would be blooming good going on your road rally cam. How restricted is a standard X-Flow manifold compared to tubular manifold? Andrew, I presume you're talking about the exhaust manifold. Yeah, quite. If you're talking about the original Ford cast iron one that all joins together and one knobbly bit, yeah, I mean, even on a stock engine, there's probably 5 horsepower. So, and if your engine's got cam in it and whatever else, it's a no-brainer to put a better exhaust in it. So Jan Eriksson, as he sees it, the lighter flow will have better, speedier response in a race car going off the gas. Yeah, quite likely. And likely possibly slicker gear changes. In all-out race, and maybe another way to look at it, an all-out race car, and a couple of kilos off the car is a couple of kilos off the car, Andrew says, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'll figure that out. Yeah, no problem, Andrew. What's the rest of the spec of the engine? Is this still a standard engine, or you upgrading it more? Lee B says, have I experience with actually manifold on a Mark 5 Cortina Pinto? Yes and no. I do remember we sold quite a lot of them, but I'm now going back to the 1980s. I don't sell exhausts But back then, I worked for someone that did. So yeah, 40 years ago, no. But then, cars, cars 40 years old, are the jigs that they're making were still as good, or is the car still the same shape? Sagging engine mounts and whatever else. Andrew, just standard. Andrew says his crossflow's just standard with a Newman phase 1. Yeah, you're getting the exhaust. I presume, Andrew, you've got a twin choke Weber on there. If you haven't, you really need to look at a twin choke Weber. And the thing is, to go with that, really, you want a cylinder head as well, because the way to get the most flexibility and best out the engine is a little everything: a little cam, a little head, a little bit of exhaust, a little bit of carburation. The two crossflows I've just built, one's 121 horsepower, one's 125. They've got really mild cams in them, and you could build that same horsepower a lot cheaper. Just stick a 234 or 244 cam in it, and you get a standard head, and you get the same power, but it'd be horrible to drive. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Yeah, I'll make the face with it. I mean, unfortunately, the thing with the videos is that videos don't pay the bills, so I can only make a few as and when, and it depends how busy I am, how many I can make. Lee B. Smith, what would be your dream Pinto engine build? Well, Andy Pipe's probably nearly already got that. With his 250 brake engine, but I guess I'd take it on another step. I'd probably use the same alley head, but Smith and Weston block, put an alley block in it, and then I'd probably go 94, 95 millimeter bore, so I could get the capacity up to about 2.3, but without having to resort to a longish 86 mil stroke. So get the stroke closer to standard and a bigger bore, and yeah, let it rev better and save a ton of weight. So yeah, the alley head and a Smith and Jones block. Right. So Steve Coles says, what's the ideal compression for a ratio for around 170 brake horsepower and 2-litre Pinto? Right. A little over 10. 10.5. 10.3, 10.5. With something like FR33, RL31, BF63, 45. Yeah, that should do that. Yes. We've got another question up now. It goes, can you run a ported Pinto head with the bosses removed? Well, you can. The guide life would be pretty short, because if you grind all the valve guide boss away, the area to support the valve is very little. So the guide and the valve stem life will be pretty short, but you can do. I used to on the BMW engines. You probably won't gain much power, if any, though, because the majority of the air in the Pinto head flows along the floor and across the back of the valve. It's not up near the top where the valve guide boss is. No, absolutely. I'm going to say never. With I won't be happy to, Andy, until you've beat those Geotechs in a straight fight. Next question up. Have I ever tested an HT1E camshaft in comparison with Newman P5 and P6? No, I nearly did. I've got an HT1 here, and I was going to fit it to something, but the HT1E has got a smaller base circle, so it wasn't suitable to run. Do I think ultimate power-wise it's going to be very different from a P5? Probably not. But it could be on the cards. At the moment, I don't have a working dyno mule Pinto that could run that sort of cam, but it's in house when I finish building crossflows. Yeah, the thing is, there's so many different cams. It's impossible to have run them all and tried them all. Certainly, the HT1E has got a lot of lift on overlap. So I'll imagine that's more peaky. I don't think it revs on as well as the original HT1, but then they've cut the timing down and put more overlap in. I'm hearing the HT1E works quite well on split Webers, which is something indicative as you'd expect, because if you've reduced the overall timing, you think that would be good. Andrew asked, what about the Warrior 16 valve head? He was chatting to a mechanic earlier and he mentioned it. I used to go, well, one of the kit car, very powerful. Yes. I mean, these days, the Warrior heads are all coming out from Phil Price, which is Connaught race engines. And I've raced against Escorts with the Warrior 16 valve head on. And yeah, they go. A lot of years ago now, I did a race against, I think it was a pit stop race. I did a race against Tony Paxman, who runs a Mark 1 Escort. And he was, his mate, Andy Pike, was also co-driving it. And I beat it, but knowing at the time I was running about 275 horsepower, that must have been about that. I think my car had more torque, but yes. So yeah, I think, yeah. Anyway, if you want one, Connaught race engines down in, I think they're Sittingbourne in Kent, but Connaught are the places to go and see one if you want one. Do I know why the Kent Cam GTS 6 is discount, low sales? No. I've got one here. I've ran it. I don't think it was any better than anything else. So yeah, perhaps. Next question up. Okay, right. I've been told a 600 sport head on a 2-litre Pinto is a power upgrade, but hassle with too much compression. Do you think it's worth looking at? We're not allowed Z-Tech or any Mark II here. Right. Well, 60, it is an upgrade, but yeah, it pushes the compression through the roof. So if you are trying to get race compression, i.e. 12-to-1 odd on a Pinto engine, and you got flat top pistons, then a 1600 head is a good starting point. But the valve lengths are different. So if you're going to upgrade it with bigger valves, then you've got to find extra long valves. So basically, I use the 1600 head on full race 2-litre Pintos, but I don't bother with a road engine, because if you're trying to upgrade your road engine, then by the time you've took 20 thou off the block and 40, 50 off the head, you've got a decent compression raise. So there's no need to there's no need to use a 1600 head. So yeah, I think it's more trouble than it's worth, unless you're looking for every last race thing. I had a Holbein head too. No, I've never had a Holbein head. I've just raced against cars with the Holbein head. Yes, I've heard it. Yes. We got mention here of 16 valve Volvo heads on Pintos. Um, yes, it comes up every so often. There is a 16 valve head off a red top Volvo B something or other engine that can be fitted to a Pinto. Tubbies, I think the heads are pretty damn rare. So yeah, very very rare in the UK. So probably in Sweden there's plenty of them about. Right, next question. On a Pinto engine, what is the power difference between a Group 1 and Group 2 valve? Anywhere between nothing and a couple of horsepower. In a fairly standard or lowish spec engine, I don't think it makes anything. I've seen 230 horsepower on a Group 1 valve. So how much more can you get, from a Group 2? Not a great deal more. Few horsepower with ultimate engines. James asks, what revs can an X-Flow standard crank accept safely if it's all balanced properly? The question is how long for? 1600 cross-flow crank will kind of stand 6,500 pretty much indefinitely. But I believe they go for a harmonic at about 6.8 or so. So you certainly can rev them. You certainly can rev them a lot more, and there's plenty of people revving 1600 cross-flow engines to, 9 on 8,000 RPM, but they do break. They snap through. I think they snap through the web between cylinders 3 and 4, and when they do, you're lucky to salvage anything out the engine. It saws the sump in half. It usually splits the block. If you're lucky, you'll save the head. So yeah, indefinitely 6,500. More than that, you pay some money, you take your chances. The problem is that we're already starting with a crank that's already had 200,000 miles of stresses into it before we then stick it in a engine and rev the hell out of it. Yeah. I believe the latest 1600 crossflow cranks, i.e. the 711Ms, as opposed to the earlier 691s out of a Mark II Cortina, are stronger. The late ones have got bigger counterweights. Why did Ford put bigger counterweights in? I don't know, but that's probably to do with the harmonic. It might also depend how light your flywheel is, because does a heavier flywheel? Yeah, 771, and that's a Fiesta, isn't it? That's a Fiesta crank, 771, if I remember rightly. I think it's basically the same forging. Yeah. You'll find out. It'll make a big mess if it breaks. James, is this a road car or a race car or something? And what sort of cam you got in it? Okay. Right, next up, we'd like to see a test of different length intake manifolds and twin Weber DCOEs, crossflow and Pinto to see the pros and cons of difference. We've kind of done this. Pinto likes long. There's no Pintos like long manifolds. There's no real cons of going long. But most 8-valve engines that don't breathe very well like long. And the reason they like long is because you got the valve opens, you get a load of air flowing in. So the bigger volume air you got shifting, because air's got momentum, the more it carries on, it fills the cylinder, even when the valve's closing and the piston's coming back up. So almost all 2-valve engines want long. So yeah. James, you've just swapped a 244 to a 254. So yeah, you're going to be 7 something thousand RPM, aren't you? Yeah, I mean 254. So presumably you're looking for 150, 160 plus horsepower. Can I do a segment on a Pinto turbo? Well, I've never turboed one, so I've turboed a few BMW engines, but there is one coming. There is one coming. I'm not building it, but I do have a Pinto turbo engine coming that I'm going to run on the dyno. So there will be something on one. Can't tell you when it'll be, because at the moment I've got a couple of V8 Rovers and I've got a couple of Z-Techs, and a Pinto on IDFs to run. So I've got about 3 or 4 engines in the pipeline. So I can't tell you when the Pinto turbo will happen, but there will be one happening. The summer on the line, I need to rebuild the absorber and the dyno because the bearings are getting warm. But there is a Pinto turbo coming. And I'm curious to do that. I'm curious to run that myself. Although turbos and heat things can go scary wrong, scary fast. So I'm much more comfortable with a pair of Webers. Yeah, and Ericsson, does the piston and conrod weight affect crankshaft counterweight needed or 4-cylinder engine? Can I lighten it? Yes. Yeah, I mean, the lighter the piston and the rod, and theoretically, the lighter you could make the counterbalance, if you've got enough counterbalance in the first place, because not all engines will have enough counterbalance. And although theoretically it's really, really bad, I know a chap that races a Hyundai, and he's literally cut all the counterweights off the crank. There are no counterweights. And it hasn't self-destructed. It must rev well. And I believe, again, Ike does some Z-Tech cranks where he literally cuts half the counterweights off. So, yes, but in theory, lighter pistons and rods, you could reduce the counterweighting on the crank. Now, whether you'd want to bore a hole in the middle or the counterweight, or probably reduce the OD a bit, I would have thought, because, and of course, actually going one step further, you could partially bore. I mean, the steel Pinto cranks have usually got a hole all the way through the big end, but you could bore a bit out the big end side of the crank and then bore a bit more out the counterweight. Pinto crank is heavy. Yes, it is. It's also indestructible. Which makes me wonder why the Sierra Cosworth has an even heavier crank, because the Sierra Cosworth crank is a lot heavier than a Pinto one, and you won't break a Pinto crank anyway. So, yeah. No, it breaks. What breaks it? What breaks the Pinto crank? Lightening the counterweights. In theory, it does, but you can grind 3-4 millimeter off a Pinto big end, and they don't seem to break. So I don't think I've ever seen a broken Pinto crank, but there's obviously some that must be some broken ones out there, because you can buy steel ones. Well, I think that'd be a no expense build. if you bought the steel standard stroke crank, but perhaps it's something the F2000 or Sports 2000 Pinto boys do. I don't know. I've never seen the bottom end of one of those. Yeah. So I don't know. You got perhaps some of you guys can educate me on that. Dimitri says, yeah, Cosworth is a nice crank. Jamper says, have I ever built an Opal Vauxhall CIH engine? Yes, I have. I only ever built one, and that was in an Opal GT. And a modified head, that an offset ground diesel crank. So that was 2.4. That had 2.4. We reworked the head a bit. Had some Paul Ivy valves in it. That had a 244 cam. And the intake plenum for a 3-litre one with the end cut off of throttle body. Yeah, it did all right. It made decent torque. Can't remember what it made. It made 180 odd brake horsepower. So yes. So what we got next? Duffield. A Fast Road Mark II aiming for maximum 180 brake horse future wise. Is a standard bottom end still okay? I'll start upgrading first. 180 brake horsepower. You're pushing 180 horsepower. You're on a Pinto. You're pushing a couple of things. You're pushing the reliability of the pistons, and you're probably going to push the reliability of the rods. But then said some of the short circuit boys got a rave screaming them around at 8,000 RPM on standard bottom end. So what are you gonna do with it? But you can do 180 horsepower on standard bottom end. You're at risk of the pistons not lasting that long, but you can do it. Yes. Okay. So yeah, you've broken a Pinto crank. It was in a stock car race. The engine and gearbox moved 20 centimeters backwards due to impact with the other car, but it didn't break. Yeah. Well, that's. Oh well, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I'd imagine the torsional shock loads on that crank were huge. Demetrius says he's broken 3 Pinto cranks. Okay. In what way have you broken them? Have you run big ends or just snap them? Because that's quite a bit different. If you've, crossflow cranks do kind of just break from fatigue, but I've never seen a Pinto one. So a lot of the time, broken crank is actually the brake is secondary. Alan Wood, hello, Alan's back again. I guess the Cotswold crank was designed for use in racing. I don't know, Alan. It's got more counterweights. It's got more counterweights. So I presume Cosworth were trying to calm the Pinto's legendary roughness by putting more counterweight into it. It's a really nice crank. It's made of a better material and it's induction hardened, but that said, I've built YB Cosworths with Pinto cranks and they've survived. James says, thank you for the live. It's great to hear the thoughts on the engine stuff. Yeah. I mean, you're welcome. This is kind of I think it's an experience for all and an exchange of views. Yeah, cool. I enjoy it, and it's never know where the questions are coming from. It's nearly 8:30 now, and I'm nearly out of tea, so it's nearly time to sign off. Hello, James. James Eden's in the room. Yes. Okay. Well, yeah. James has, should we say correctly, saying, remember to subscribe and ring the bell. Future live streams and videos. Yes. Yeah, hopefully there'll be more. For as long as you guys want to keep tuning in, I'll keep waffling away. Could I do a Pinto Pinto giveaway contest and let me win? Well, I must admit I've got lots of bits here, and I keep thinking I should build one just to try and recuperate some of the money I spend on the dyno. So yeah, maybe. Curbside Classic says hello. Yeah, I recognise that name from somewhere. I don't know where from, but I do recognise it from somewhere. I'm guessing YouTube. Andrew Wallace, yeah. Well, you're welcome. You know, it's a two-way thing, and it's cool because it makes my brain cells think a bit, and yeah, see what I can remember. Charlotte's in the room. Hello, Charlotte. Yeah, you're all here listening to waffle. Yeah, okay. Well, you've heard me waffle a bit over the years. I guess the girls have got bored and gone away ages ago. Could we build and test a light flywheel and a heavy one? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess it's something. I mean, what we ought to do is we could actually, yeah, I could run an engine up with a heavy flywheel. In fact, I think it was done recently on Engine Masters. And what they did, they ran it up several ways. They held it at a steady state, say 3,000 RPM, 3,500 RPM, measured the torque output. And then they did an Excel run and again measured the power and did the same again with lighter flywheels, and they did get differences. I don't think the difference was dramatic, but they did get differences. Andre, yeah, no, you're welcome. All right, yes, South Africa's in the room. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. What sort of time of day is it? Because you're in the southern hemisphere there, so it's getting late here. So presumably it's very early over there. Have you still got any cross flows left in South Africa? Because they all seem to be turning up on my doorstep at the moment. Yeah, no, well, it's 8:31, so it's time for me to go home and kiss the wife and pet the dog. I've got that the right way around. So yeah, cool. Well, yeah, curbside. Yeah, I mean, yeah, cool. Always, yeah, drop us a link sometime and I'll look you up. Yeah, so it's 8:30 now, so it's time for me to depart. Thanks for all you joining in and your insights and your questions, and all being well, I'll see you the first Tuesday next month. See you later, guys. Take care.